I think we'll get started here in a few minutes. It's too much hassle right now. I think I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call from our clerk.
Fitzwater. Here. Graham.
Here.
Henry.
Here.
Hussey.
Here.
Kimna.
Here.
Mahalovich.
Here.
Prather. Here. Schreiber.
Here.
Ward. Wiseman. Present. Had to be different.
Looks like we're all accounted for, except Laura said she couldn't make it tonight. Okay. First of all, in terms of the budget book and the navigation, this is something I wasn't aware of, but your iPads, when you download it, if you go to the bottom of the screen, there's a book, like an open the book, and it has the bookmarks in it, so you can race to any section on the iPad. Very helpful. Thank you for getting that taken care of. Before we go forward, I'm going to go backwards to ask, are there any questions with regard to our revenue presentations? Okay. Then I'll ask for a little bit of additional explanation for the forecast model that I didn't pick up, but I wanted to have some clarification on that. So if you have this sheet that is 2 sheets, second sheet we're going to look at. I had a question, and I think it might be beneficial for everybody else. So, Argie, would you mind talking about the forecast model?
Okay, I just wanted to make clear the difference between the 2 pages. The first page is the way that you're used to seeing it, with just a straight forecast, and this is basically for cash flow purposes. This is to predict the fund balance and whether or not we meet the 17% minimum fund balance recommendation. So in this first sheet, you'll see that up until 2021, it dips below that 17%, and then the 2022, it's almost at 11%. So what I wanted to do was show an alternate sheet, which is your second sheet, that includes a line in the expenditure section for the historical unexpended. And the historical unexpended usually runs from 7 to 12.5%, 13%. And so what is built into this cash flow forecast is a 4% conservative amount for the unexpended expenditures, just for the purposes of predicting the fund balance. So basically, departments are budgeted money, and in some areas it's usually not the same in every department. Between year to year, it's not in the same line items. It's not an example of maybe where a budget could be cut. This is just strictly an example of where the money's not spent that year and then gets included in the fund balance. So this alternate version now shows, a 33% fund balance at the end of 2022. So somewhere in the middle of those lies where the fund balance is going to be. So basically, worst case scenarios. The first one is the worst case scenario for the lowest it will be, and the other one is more a version of this is probably more where it's going to lie. So in between those two is where we're going to end up.
And of course, we're talking about the line 2 lines up from the yellow line as that 4%.
For that yes, and
like
it's around 1.3 million.
And that's conservative because you said it ranged even up to 10%.
The historical was 7 to 12.5%.
So my mistake was, and probably you all might have picked up on this, is that I thought we might be approving a projection that showed us going into a fund balance below our 17%. So that was an incorrect assumption.
Well, and the 5-year forecast is just for informational purposes. It's not really an approval process for the forecast. The purpose was to show that in the future years we will stay within our 17% required minimum.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. For my benefit, I hope that might have helped some other folks too with some questions they might have had. I don't see any questions, so I think we'll go ahead and go right into the budget book. Will you help us lead that first up? Are we at Mayor and Council?
Stevie, you want to?
Or where are we at?
The mayor and council. Yeah. Or I can.
Mayor
doesn't
and
matter.
Council tab?
I thought we had,
Versus mayor and council.
So for mayor and council, no significant changes. The only change was we moved the prosecutor into this budget, so it really is not associated with municipal court. So that's really it. No significant changes there.
Question for you, Steve. When you say you move the prosecutor into this budget, what are you referring to? I'm sorry.
So on page 20, and it's the second line down there where it has salaries prosecuting attorney. See the number there?
The 34,999, top right, second one down.
Correct. So that was just moved from municipal court into this budget. Go ahead, what?
Was there
See
a
it?
reason why we did that?
Yeah, there is. And Ryan can explain a little bit more about that if you want him to. But essentially, there was some concern about having the prosecuting attorney in with the judge and municipal court and making it look like that was a combined function. We really wanted to keep those separate, and that was at a recommendation of the judge. So we just moved it into with the other elected officials.
Thank
Ryan, anything you want to add to that?
That pretty concisely states it, but I'm happy to answer any further questions on that.
I'm fine with that. Thank you.
No other questions? Go ahead and proceed.
City clerk?
Yeah.
No significant change there other than anticipating that Phyllis might in the next couple of years, so there's a little bit of money there to kind of do some emergency control for that inevitable situation should it arise. So we have two people, somebody that can work with Phyllis and get up to speed on procedures and things like that.
Any
Should that situation arise, correct?
comments from the city clerk?
I couldn't hear, what was it?
Okay,
So that's the only significant, change there.
okay, going once, twice. We're up to the
I
city-
assume if that money's not in the budget, then maybe she can't leave. We'll come back to that maybe.
Yes. Mr. Henry.
Well, considering her performance measures, I would say she's probably the most valuable player in the city. So,
I'll second that motion.
Good takeaway on that, yes. And I appreciate Councilman Henry bringing that up, that we'd like each director to bring up the performance measures as they present the budget as well. So, good.
And for city administrator, no significant changes in budgeting there in the dollars. Most of my performance measures depend on the accomplishments of the other departments, so those accomplishment numbers are dropped in after they've done all of theirs. The other departments have done all of theirs.
I appreciate your work on the performance measures, and the only thing that's a little tricky about those is review only one full year and then compared to a half year.
It is. At this point, it's difficult
Yeah.
to do, and we've really talked a little bit among the leadership team about whether we want to have another cutoff time period, and it's difficult trying to get that information now. But at least there's something now that you can look and certainly make some projections a little bit further ahead, and department directors are certainly able to talk about some updated kinds of projections if you want to have those as part of the discussion.
Now, the FY 2015, it wasn't implemented, or it was kind of
It was a
still
partial.
evolving at the time.
Correct,
So this
yeah.
is our first look at the data in a sense. Okay,
Correct.
well, I appreciate the efforts.
And I guess I would just mention that you know, outcome measures are very broad, and those are usually related to quality of life kinds of things. And I kind of use a shorthand notes of safe, clean, pretty, fun, and easily traveled. So, you know, there can be some others, but it's usually quality of life related outcomes. How do we achieve those outcomes? Then there's some workload and efficiency measures below that that kind of relate to achievement of the outcomes, but those are kind of more statistics, more numbers kinds of things that are easy to see. But just because you have a higher number of, I'll use something like tons of sand, even though that's not one of them, but I'll use that as an example. Just because the tons of sand may go up or down doesn't necessarily mean that safety goes up or down. There's other things related to that. So you know, it's just important to make sure that as we're talking about outcomes that we understand that they're very broad at this level, but department directors certainly at their levels have some more specifics. They get more into the operational kinds of things, but these are very broad outcomes. So.
And I might add, just while we're on this topic, is that I was caught off guard by somebody saying, well, staff hadn't responded to blah, blah, blah. And on this case, I asked you a question, and you said, well, their performance measure indicates they're do that every 24 hours or every 48 hours. And so it would have been an anomaly had it not occurred. But I was able to go back to that person, and I said, well, we measure that, and that's not the normal case if they were, in fact, say it took so much length, and on a normal basis it doesn't. So that's where I've used that before.
Okay, good.
Okay, why don't you proceed with?
City Councilor?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Going through the budget, it pretty much tracks with what current year budget is going through, with a few deviations. First of all, in the city councilor's office, there's a reduction in salary. That's due to a allocation of an administrative tech position, which was formerly 1/3 city councilor, 1/3 city clerk, 1/3 municipal court. We transferred those duties and made that a full-time court FTE, so there's a corresponding reduction in salaries that you'll see. There's a $500 increase in dues and publication. That's directly related to a renewal of our electronic legal research contract coming up this year, and there was a rate increase. We researched that, tried to find a more competitive service, but the existing service, even with the rate increase, was the most competitive that we found. $500 decrease in malpractice insurance. That's just from really sharpening our pencils and figuring out what's necessary in that category. And then probably the most significant change is a increase of $4,350 in professional services. And looking at the current year's budget, I believe that funding for professional services, which would directly relate to outside counsel, was underfunded for this year. You can tell that particularly with the Busher appeal. The amount of money that was allocated to outside counsel was vastly outstripped what was budgeted, and so when you fund at something at like $5,000 for the year, you are making an assumption that there's not going to be any significant legal issues that come up that year. So by increasing this budget item, what you're doing is providing yourself something of a budgetary cushion to address unknown issues that come up in a more responsive manner. So that's really what the request is related to. So that way, when those issues come up, we're not scrambling and trying to pull out of other funds to figure out how to pay outside counsel. So just a little bit more buffer to address those issues that will more than likely come up in any given year, but at this point are unknown. That is it for Office of the City Councilor.
Any questions on that budget? Any questions on the performance measures? I guess I was a bit surprised to know that we had 463, well, last year, and we're up to 358 sunshine requests. It's more than one a day.
Yeah, it's that sounds about right. It's a daily function of our office, the sunshine requests.
Huh. At one time, I'd ask, we were informed of a sunshine request, and I go, well, could you let us know when we're getting sunshine requests? And I don't know who said it at the time. It goes, you don't want all of that information, most likely.
Yeah, I mean, you literally getting it every single day. So a lot of the performance measures in the budget are deadline related for my office, because what we do is serve the other departments where the city is our client. And so to the extent that that the performance measures show anything, it shows the volume at which we participate in basically all city processes.
Yeah, and I so know you share the sunshine request with the clerk. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions? I think we're ready to go to municipal court.
Thank you. So in municipal court, what you'll see is a corresponding increase in salaries due to that transfer of the admin tech position from counselor clerk in court into a full-time court position. You also see a $3,000 increase in court security. This was really an issue where it was previously under budgeted. For some reason, I think there may have been some carryover from a previous year, but the volume that we're asking our private security company to work out, this is a more realistic number to reflect what we're actually asking them to do in a year. And also you'll see a $2,750 increase. This is directly attributable to a new software maintenance contract for state-required online docketing. This, essentially, Supreme Court is requiring that all municipal courts provide an online docket, access to the docket through the internet. And in order to do that, we need to sign a maintenance agreement to upkeep the software that makes that online docket possible. The pink sheet issue that's attached with the municipal court is the addition of a 2 half days. It will be 2 Friday mornings a month. So not every single Friday morning, but probably every other Friday morning is the way to think about it. That is based on the recommendation of the municipal judge. And essentially what we're looking to do there is to decrease the volume that happens on the regular Wednesday court date. What he's anticipating using that for are failures to appear, and then also situations where someone is unable to appear on the regular Wednesday docket, making it more flexible for the defendants that have to come into municipal court. Essentially what we're doing, and how this, I believe it ties directly to the performance measures for the municipal court. The goals, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get the cases disposed of more quickly by encouraging defendants to actually show up for court dates. This will lead to a reduction of warrants and failures to appear and improve efficiency. It will be a direct impact by decreasing the amount of paperwork and staff time on a per case basis. There's also the added bonus of improving operational impacts on other departments by reducing the total volume of people in City Hall on court days. So other departments get slowed down on Wednesday because we have so many people in municipal court on Wednesdays. By reducing, by adding a day that the court can utilize, we'll hope to reduce that volume and improve operational aspects for other departments. And so your efficiency numbers and the performance measures, I believe, will be positively impacted by this change, by getting more cases resolved more quickly, and for an increase in the total percent of fines collected.
Council Lady Weissman.
Thank you. At this time, I understand the request for increase in time for court because it's in this actual building. When we move to a different building with the municipal court, can we alternate or reduce some court time since we're not going to be obstructing business here at City Hall?
I think that's something that the municipal judge is open to once we get in there, see how we're operating, see if we're improving our efficiencies in such a manner that we can, you know, I really want to say that the improving the operational aspects for the other city departments is an added bonus. It's not the primary goal, but it's a secondary effect of adding that day. So I think the judge is open to looking at whatever makes sense and making the court operate in the most efficient manner possible. But it's the amount of bodies that we have to process in the municipal court on any given Wednesday that's really the driver, and the move to a new court building is not going to reduce the amount of bodies, and so we cram in a really full docket on Wednesdays, and in the move it's not going to reduce docket. That's, you know, the two aren't going to be related. But if it is such that having more room makes that process more efficient, I think that's something we can address. You know, if it just, hey, we don't need to do this anymore, then that's something that both myself and I think the municipal judge would be open to discussing.
Any other questions? Thanks for tying that to the...
Sorry, I was just going to put Ryan on the spot a minute. Would it be helpful to have just an update on where we are on municipal court move?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Thank you. So we recently just did a change order on the architect's design services contract. Essentially what we're doing is we're moving into an investigational phase. So what that means, the architect is going to retain some mechanical and electrical engineers to actually get into the building and take a look at the current systems and figure out what it would take to adapt the building into a court use. And once that information is made available, then the architect can draw up some final cost estimates on which you could write bid documents on. So that's really what we're waiting for, is for the engineers that the architect is going to retain to get in their information to him, so that way he can get some cost estimates that we can present to the city council. We're hoping for that very, very soon. He said it wouldn't be too much, and I believe we have a site visit tomorrow by the engineers to get in there and poke around and take a look.
Any, Councilman Graham?
So with the 2 additional half days, does that require, or will that call for a salary increase for the judge and prosecutor?
We are not including any type of salary increase for this. That is something that those 2 positions are unique in that they're paid per month. They're not paid hourly, and they're not paid an annual salary. So it's on a per month basis, and we are not anticipating a increase in those per month salaries based on these 2 additional half days.
So I'm just trying to make sure this isn't a setup for ask for additional pay.
It's certainly not a setup by me.
Okay. No, I'm not saying you. What I'm saying is we're asking for this. Once it's approved, then we come back and we ask for additional pay because we've got
It is
these
my
2
it's
extra
my
days.
understanding that this is to make the job work more efficiently and not have everything come crashing down on one day. So maybe not a increase in total number of hours worked, but a better spending of those hours on a monthly basis is how I see it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Council Lady Weissman?
To follow up on Councilman Graham's question about this being a setup, you had asked, and I'm not suggesting that, but you had indicated earlier that there are some, I guess, inefficiencies. Is there anything that within the court that things are moving slowly? Is there anything that needs to be done or that we can to speed up some of those things? To eliminate and not require these extra 2 half days?
There's not as much, how do I put this? There's not as much plea offers, which would reduce the amount of actual court appearances in the city of Jefferson that you probably find in other cities, and that's probably the biggest difference of why a city of our size is seeing such high volume of actual in-person court appearances, because that's really what's driving this is the amount of in-court appearances that happen on every single Wednesday. And so, but that is a discretionary thing, and not every case is appropriate for a plea deal. And so I'm not sure if there's anything that this body could do within the current system that we use that would increase the amount of plea deals, which would then decrease the amount of in-court appearances.
Councilman Kimna, were you up next?
How long have you been on
I didn't hear the question.
Sorry, how long have you been? Microphone's off.
I'm not 100% sure about that. It's
been a while.
It's been as long as I've been here, but I believe that we reduced or went away from night court probably at least 4 or 5 years ago. That is only anecdotally on my behalf. So if anyone else wants to chime in there.
And is other municipalities in the area, like Wednesdays, they have other days too, or?
No. I mean, other municipalities in the area are much smaller than we are and don't have nearly the docket we do. And so 1 day a week is pretty typical for your run-of-the-mill municipal court. I would say for our population, we have a larger docket than you would otherwise expect for whatever reason. You know, if you go to a St. Louis suburb or a Jackson County suburb that has a similar population, we're probably a little bit higher. I think that has to do a lot with our substantial increase in daytime population. So we punch above our weight as far as population goes. So I would say that to run a court on 1 day a week for the docket that we have is it's asking a lot of court staff to do that. I think if you look at cases per FTE, we're probably on the higher end of what you would see throughout the state for other cities of comparable size.
Councilman Henry.
Well, the reality of it is, from what I see, because I'm by here occasionally on Wednesdays and checking up on some folks, but from what I've seen, people can't pay fines. So those cases are constantly getting continued, or they're on payment plans. So they keep coming back. And guess what? The citations out here, the tickets, the summonses, those don't ever stop. So you still got a wave of folks that are still paying on cases, still paying on fines, still on payment plans, while you got a new crop of people still coming right behind them. And so it's just this is just a continuing thing. Extra space won't help that. It just won't. So that won't help. And from what I can see, but Ryan is pretty much spot on kind of with what he's been saying.
I would just following up on really both of those points, what Ryan and Councilmember Henry mentioned in response to Councilwoman Weissman's question is that I'm sure the staff would say that additional clerical support would be helpful. I don't know that that has an impact on the 2 half-days, because the way I think of it is we've got that workload and we're spreading it over just a longer period of time, irrespective of the space issues. But I know that the clerical staff is very, very busy.
Any further questions, comments? If not, it looks like we're ready to move to Human Resources. Okay, Gail?
Thank you. The Human Resources Department will continues to operate as a service department to the other departments, assisting them in meeting their service delivery to the community. Taking a look at our performance measures, there's a couple of things that might or might not stand out to you a little bit. One, you'll see that our number of recruitments per authorized positions has increased substantially. A big reason for that is because we changed the way we're recruiting for the Parks and Recreation Department, their seasonal employees. In previous years, we did those kind of as big lumps, and this year we really broke it down by the departments. So what that ended up doing is creating a much higher number of recruitments, but actually ultimately lower number of applications processed. So we've tried that this year. We'll kind of regroup after this year and talk with Parks and Recreation and see if that continues to work and if that's the way we're going to go with that. You'll also see that our new hires processed is coming down. Our turnover rate is down from last year. So those are, I think it's all positive stuff. Looking at our budget itself, there really are very few changes. You'll see also in our performance measures that we continue to be less than 1% of the overall general fund budget, so definitely not a big impact. Looking kind of at our line items, there's really only, I think, really 3 changes on the budget. We removed about $200 from printing and about $200 from office supplies. And then one of my pink sheet items was a tuition reimbursement request for one of the employees in our department who is wanting to take some classes. So that request was funded. As far as our pink sheets, we had 6 requests. 2 of those were funded. One, the tuition reimbursement that I mentioned, and the other is the floating holidays, which I know I think Steve talked about and the mayor talked about at the last meeting. That it doesn't actually have a budget impact. No, it will have an impact to the department. It may have some impact to the departments as they go through the year, but the actual approving of those is not going to change the way the finance department, city administrator, the mayor will actually budget the budget. So hopefully that makes sense. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Prather.
It looks like on the salaries that they went up, about 16,000, but on the part-time it went down to about 26,000 or so. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, that is the part-time is the internship. Last year it was funded, and this year it was not funded. So that's the difference.
That's a difference in the full-time salaries or the part-time salaries?
We also, somebody else didn't we also move Becky from the wellness?
Yeah, we did. I think in 16 we moved Becky's position. The way it was funded, it was partially funded in the HR department and partially funded out of the health insurance fund. And so her position, I think last year, was moved entirely into the human resources budget. So that will stay.
All right, thank you.
I'd like you to go ahead and comment with regard to the internship program and its success
Yeah, I'd be happy to. We had 8 interns this summer. We received, I think we had about, I don't remember, 30, 40 applications for the positions. Like I said, we ended up with 8 of them. They worked in police, information technology, wastewater. We had one that shared between planning and protective services and human resources / administration, one in engineering, and 3 in parks and recreation. They were all from the community, but as far as schools, they went to William Woods, a couple Lincoln, Southern Illinois, State Technical College in Lynn, University of Central Missouri, Truman State, and Lindenwood. They started on May 30th. They worked through last week. They participated in many meetings within their assigned departments. They also came to the leadership staff meeting. I think you guys all got to meet them at one of the city council meetings. They also participated in the Chamber of Commerce Jeff City 101, their internship program. They worked in their assigned departments, and then on Fridays they rotated around the other departments so that during the summer they were able to really get a good idea of exactly how the entire municipal government operates. We did have them all complete a survey before they left, and every one of them were extremely positive. They were very grateful for the opportunities. They really liked the different aspects, all the things that they got to learn about the city in general, as well as within their field of study. I'm happy to share those surveys with any of you if you're interested in seeing them. So definitely think that it was a very successful program. Now, if you look at the pink sheet items this year, I realize they weren't funded, but you'll see I did have one person ask me about the funding, because the funding this year is about $10,000 less than last year, and that's because we took some out. We funded for 8 this past year. We're requesting funding for 5 for this next year, with the idea that we would only fund the general fund positions, and that the other departments, for example, wastewater, parks and recreation, could fund it through their seasonal. So if they were to end up with interns, they could fund it through their seasonal. And just to note, as far as we had 3 within Parks and Recreation, but Parks and Recreation did fund 2 of those 3, and we funded only 1 of them through what was given to the program itself. And they funded that through their seasonal money.
This is an item that wasn't on the approved side and then became on the approved side after some debate before we passed last year's, but that's my only comment. Did you, Councilman Hudson? Okay. I have a question with regard to the $0 amount regarding floating holidays. I guess it's just a productivity thing. It's not a dollar cost to the city.
Right. Well, there definitely could be some costs within some of the departments. The fire department could have some step-up pay. There could be some overtime on occasion in some of the departments. But all of the department directors have said that they can manage any additional expenses with the current budget. That it's what they're used to doing with vacations, with sick leave, that type of thing, and they would continue to manage in the same format.
I think you relayed some things that were important regarding that, how it would accrue and not accrue. And
well, for the float, I wouldn't. First of all, I agree with everything Gail said. The floating holiday would be if you don't use it within the given year, then you lose it. It goes away. So from my point of view, kind of the way I think about it is that employees, I certainly would be one of those that would be more inclined to use that floating holiday first, because if you don't use it, you lose it. So you use that one first. And then your other vacation days, thereafter, and if for some reason you didn't use an allocation of vacation days, you can accrue those vacation days, not the floating holiday, but the vacation day. And so that may be something that gets accrued later on sometime, whatever that may be. The employee may take more vacation days a subsequent year or something like that.
So the impact would be down the road.
If there is any impact, it may be down the road if an employee were to terminate and get paid out at that time. But we have some restrictions on that. I don't remember what those are offhand. Those are usually by years of service, right? For payout of vacation days?
Payout of vacation days, they get that paid out to them as long as they give proper notice.
Okay, so
and
it's
each
the full
position
thing.
has notice requirements as far as how much notice they're required to give. And as long as they give that, they do get that vacation balance paid out to them.
And as I recall, I'm just going by memory here, but I think the Austin Peters report said we were 2 or 3 days less than our peer group.
Correct. I think so.
Question? Human Services going once, twice? Finance Department.
And I'm sorry, I just wanted to mention, and I'll do it here as I did on the revenue side when we were given the overall budget. I personally would like to see a higher number in there for the salary increases for employees, however we go about implementing that increase. Right now, it's not 2% across the board. We just stuck a number in there, as was said in the mayor's overall memo. But I certainly think a higher percentage is warranted, and some of that may depend a little bit on the philosophy on whether you want to go for pay for performance or some other kind of implementation strategy. But I do think that number should be higher. So we're certainly willing to have some more of that conversation now or later if you desire.
Council Lady Weissman.
I noticed that there is a pink sheet item for a $25 per month for deferred compensation that was not funded. Is that one of the items that you're kind of hinting at here, or?
No, that particular item is an additional dollar amount that we would fund for deferred compensation, which is in addition to the loggers piece. That is not my thought is straight on salaries.
Thank you.
And I'm going to put Margie on the spot here to give you a chance to think about it. Overall increase for general fund for a 1% increase in salaries is about
For the general fund, it's about $200,000
$200,000
for every 1%. That's salaries and benefits.
I think we're ready now to go to finance.
Okay.
Thank you.
On page 56 are the finance performance measures. And of course, our big goal, and we've met them, is to receive an unqualified audit and also to receive the Government Finance Officers Association Budget Award and the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report and the Popular Annual Financial Report. We haven't heard back on those yet, but fully expect to receive those awards as well. As far as the line item budgets, on page 59, you'll see a reduction in the part-time without benefits. We had funding for part-time building service workers that were in finance that were moved to the police department to be with the rest of the building workers, the two that they have in the police department, and so that they would be in a group and supervised. The only other line item changes to note is under the audit, and we do have an increase this year. Every other year we have an OPEB audit, and this FY18 we'll need to have that extra money in there for that OPEB audit, the other post-employment benefits audit. And other than that, there aren't any changes, unless you have any questions.
Any questions? Who's doing non-departmental?
Okay, I'll go ahead and cover the non-departmental. There aren't a lot of changes to this department either. The gas, you'll see the increase, and that goes along with the other increases estimated for gas. On the insurance section, that's where the main differences are this year. Last year, we were going through some rebids of our contracts, and we weren't sure of the pricing, so we had included a 10% increase. And what the FY18 budget is based on is a 7% increase on what we've actually experienced in FY17. So you'll see a reduction in those lines. And that's the major differences in the non-departmental. Also note on page 64 is where you will see some money added for the Jefferson Day celebration, $1,000 for the mayor approved, and the mayor's $20,000 for the MSP. Any questions?
I would just note that there's also a Jefferson Day event. There's some funding there. Did you say that?
Yeah.
Mention that one? Okay. And then, do we have the workers' comp? Was that issue in here, or is that somewhere else? Where we had the fund that we needed to replenish.
Councilman Graham.
Steve, maybe you can answer this, or maybe the mayor, but what is Jefferson Day? I know it's something new that we're doing, but is it filled with a bunch of activity? I mean, what is it going to consist of?
Don't know. I think it's just a dollar amount. Remember when Thomas Jefferson came to the council meeting and spoke? Were you here for that?
Mm-hmm.
So there was some discussion about putting in some money for an event. I don't know what that is. We don't have a group that's requesting that or that's overseeing that, so it just kind of took a guess at a dollar amount and put $1,000 in for the general fund, and parks maybe pick up some of that. But it's not anything specific.
Because it's something new, right?
It is new.
Councilman Henry.
And just to piggyback off of that, Councilman Graham, Thomas Jefferson really was here. That was him speaking.
I actually got a letter from him.
I see the baffled look on your face. It was really Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, the thought is that that'd be the genesis for Thomas Jefferson Day to celebrate our namesake, and that's not sure who would take that on. Oh.
You're not here? Oh,
Okay.
well, that.
That's the reason why I looked like that. I was like,
I
missed that one.
Well, that can be, you can find that on the YouTube channel.
Should we move on?
Any questions on non-departmental? Okay, we're going to move on to the next one, information tech.
Information technology. On 65, you'll see some performance measures, and I just want to point out that in IT, we do have a ticket-based system for problems or maintenance issues. It is electronic, it's SysAid, and so most of those percentages and numbers comes from that system as far as the rating of from the survey respondents. Moving on to the line items on page 70. There's not a lot of changes. In the contractual services section, there's maybe some movements between lines. There's a little bit of an increase for training and professional services. We put some money in there for maybe some cable work and assistance in moving to the Exchange 2016 upgrade, but there was a reduction in the internet bills. So overall in that section, there was about a $1,700 reduction from last fiscal year. And then under the repairs and maintenance, we've got software licenses. Maintenance went down a little bit, but maintenance agreements went up. So there's just a little bit of movement between those lines. Overall, there was only about a $1,500 increase in that section. And then there was one pink sheet that was requested or that was funded in the IT department, and that is the purchase of a mail machine for citywide use. The total cost of the machine is $1,500, but we have allocated it against all the funds, so the general fund share is $8,700, and that request is being asked for in the IT budget. Be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Hussey?
I'm looking at the unfunded pink sheet, which is the firewall, correct? Replacing the firewall, am I right? Is there, I mean, I see that obviously Steve made a decision
Yeah, we're
there.
going to try to, we're planning on trying to use the sales tax G money
Okay. I was
to
like,
cover that.
please don't let our firewall go down in a year.
We'll manage it.
Okay.
Questions? Concerns? Thank you. I think we're moving on to the police department. Everybody, so. Chief?
Thank you. First, I want to introduce Bethany Benward. She is my
Welcome.
finance person, so she manages the 5 budgets assigned to the police department. When we discussed what we were going to do and how we were going to present 5 different budgets and dozens of line items and pink sheets and that type of thing, performance measures, we decided that we would go through it in a particular order, general fund first, display the performance measures, but we will only include the outcome measures. If one looks at the other 2 categories of effectiveness indicators and workload service level indicators, those are all numbers, and in fact the performance measure, outcome measure subsection, there's a lot of numbers also. So but we'll put them up on the screen here real quickly just for your edification. If you have any questions, we can discuss those. And then we'll follow that because of all the different line items. Most of our budget is kind of status quo. So we've included the pink sheets, not to advocate or discuss the things that were denied, but just as an informational item, what we submitted and whether or not it was included in that particular budget. So if we could begin. Those are patrol performance measures included in the general fund. As I said, that is strictly the outcome measures, and I would say that, and as Steve indicated earlier, it's difficult halfway through the year to get a real finger on what is going on, but I would say that crime is down this year. I'm not going to attribute it to any particular reason or reasons, but we have been successful in reducing crime so far, and I think the traffic crashes are down also. Our biggest problem is getting survey respondents. We don't have a whole lot yet. I mean, we'll try to encourage participation as the year goes on, but are there any questions about those performance measures?
Thank you very much.
And then the pink sheets, within the general fund, and I didn't touch anything, and it's moving.
Can you make it go back one?
Okay. We requested a property room technician that would be subordinate to our property room or evidence technician. It was funded at, and we're not sure of the percentage, so that was 50-50. We tried to get a determination, and so I guess it is a 50-50 funding. I'm not going to read to you, but on the board you'll see some of the important factors included in this request, why we asked for that position. It is important to note, I think, that there are now over 38,000 distinct separate items in that property room, and that's a lot. I mean, we fall further behind every week. We just simply cannot destroy at the rate more property comes in, either as evidence or found property. So that's a continuing problem, and we're happy to at least take a step in the right direction so far. So, any questions on that position?
Any questions, Chief?
So just to make sure, that's a part-time position, requested full-time position. I certainly think it could support a full-time work, but it's just balancing everything else. We put it in at a part-time position.
We also requested 15 mobile data terminals for placement in our patrol cars. That was not funded. We're looking now as an alternative, our half-cent sales tax money as maybe a resource for that purchase. As you can see, they're all due for replacement. There are 14 additional MDTs that we plan on replacing in 2019. Questions?
Thank you.
Vehicle replacement, we requested 7 patrol cars. 5 are presently funded. I guess we have 6 bullets there. Important thing to note, the vehicles being replaced currently average 114,000 miles. And then anticipating the continuing need, I wanted to note that next year, if we project mileage at the same rate those 11 vehicles in the bottom bullet have accumulated miles, we will have 11 cars that will have approximately 111,000 miles. I also would like you, in a sense of relativity, the Highway Patrol replaces their patrol cars at 50 to 55,000 miles. So we're presently doubling that mileage. And in discussing how mileage relates to maintenance and maintenance cost, Sean at Central Maintenance says unquestionably the more miles you have on the vehicle, the increased maintenance costs that we suffer. So, and then officer safety, of course, is directly related to how well those cars function, because they're used quite often in emergency situations. Any questions?
Questions?
I would just add again, vehicles certainly a priority, and I know we have some other vehicles in here like animal control and some others, but it's certainly a high priority. It's just a matter of trying to balance out where we were, budget-wise. But that's not to say that those aren't high priorities along with some of the other vehicles. Maybe sales tax is an option, or at the time we were having this discussion, at least at my level, there was some discussion at the Finance Committee, I think, about having some discussion about projects and projected use of fund balance. And so some of the conversation, that might be an option as well, but it certainly didn't have anything to do with the priority of these vehicles as well as some of the other equipment that wasn't funded.
Yeah, this will probably be the closest I come to advocating for something that was denied. I just want you to know that the numbers are going to continue to increase each subsequent year as these miles accumulate, maintenance costs go up. We're just going to come back for bigger and bigger numbers of cars. And just a point I want to make. Okay, so the second budget is animal control. And the performance measures, which you can see, again, I won't read those to you. I will say that so far this year, we have an increase in both adoptions and redemptions. I don't know discern the difference, but last year, 2016, we had an adoption redemption combination of an 84% success rate. So far this year, through the first 6 months, we are over 90%. I believe it's 91 or 92% adoption redemption. So extraordinarily happy with those figures, and that speaks to the efforts of the staff at the animal shelter. So I'd entertain any questions.
Seeing none, proceed. Councilman Henry.
Chief, what do the staffing levels look like for animal control right now?
We are authorized 8 full-time positions, and I think due to health reasons, we have lost 1 person in the 6 years the police department has had that program.
Thank you.
And there are requests from different sources for volunteer advocates or additional, and I don't doubt that they could be used. I'd also note that there is a vehicle in this approved, and I looked at the mileage, and it was 125,000. So, and I suspect that that's a pretty high mileage and is certainly needed So I don't know that it's, a trade-off for any of the other police vehicles. It's just, they're all priorities.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, the unfunded, we asked for 2 part-time customer service specialists. Again, it's not funded. Our thought process was part-time, we could say, on benefits. They wouldn't receive any benefits. I also think it's important to note the 4th bullet we've had, where we had 23,000 visitors in 2016, and I don't know if we accept visitors 6 days a week, but a quick math would be 80 a day. Very popular place. I attended a advisory board meeting last month, and I couldn't, nobody could park in the parking lot. There were so many people there looking at our dogs, cats, and otherwise. So very popular place, very successful place. And this is the vehicle that was tentatively approved. And as Steve said, it has 125,846 miles and growing. So, communications or 911.
Could I, is
Yes,
there
sir.
any comments on the animal control? I might have. One is that your priority was part-time customer service, and we funded, and we have letters of support, and some of us got some stuff on the mail, and we ended up getting a vehicle was what we ended up getting funded out of those priorities. And both I see are needs, but any comment on that?
Well, I want to be good to my promise of not advocating for things that were denied. That was not a decision I made, and I have to respect that. I mean, both are needs, so we would happily accept either one.
Okay.
I guess and as I've said, for everything that's not funded, it's certainly our priorities. I thought of putting the vehicle in because it's a one-time cost as opposed to an ongoing cost for personnel, particularly given that I think the personnel portion should be higher. But all of those, the customer service representative certainly would be a welcomed addition to the animal control.
Looks like we're, okay, without any further comments, I guess we'll go to the next section. Thank you.
The next fund is 911 or communications. Our outcome measures, this is one that really is just surveys basically, except for the final one. And our biggest difficulty is participation. Captain Wilde and I discussed that before he left on military leave, and we were simply going to encourage participation by the fire department and the sheriff's office, asking for feedback. And I'm sorry, I just don't know what our status is with call received to call dispatch times. I know we had a pretty good rate already with emergency times running about 3.5 minutes, I believe, which is very good considering geographically how spread out Jefferson City is. And then non-emergency, I believe, was 8 or 9 minutes. So if we can do better, that's great. But I can't recite numbers tonight. Questions?
Proceed.
This was the emergency notification system, not funded. I think one thing to note is the cost that we had estimated at $36,000 did not include a Cole County contribution. And considering, although I'm not pretending to speak for Cole County, they have been very cooperative in the last year or two, couple of years, and we have discussed this with Bill Farr, and so we're optimistic that there will be a shared, we will share expense on this notification system when it's funded. And we are presently looking for alternate sources of funding rather than the line item budget.
Councilman Graham, do you?
Yeah, Chief, this was something that I was very passionate about last year trying to get in the budget. And I know that after the budget was approved, I had the opportunity to go over to Cole County Sheriff's Department, and they did a presentation on a system that's similar to this, but was a lot cheaper than the $36,000, in which the residents of the county could opt into doing on their cell phone. And I don't know if any other council members went to that presentation. There was 3 of us that was there, and what they came up with something to the tune of maybe $10,000, and they even said that there's a certain bank that even funds that for them. Is that something that we can piggyback off of? That wouldn't cost us $36,000, and we could possibly find the same bank or somebody to help fund that.
Well, on our checklist is discuss what they offer with them, and then of course make a comparison with what we know that system to be. I hate to say you get what you pay for, but we're very comfortable with that system as far as no cost to the community members and the flexibility that offers. I'm not saying we won't eventually say, hey, we're in with the county on their system, but I think we have to be careful, thoughtful about it, and we'll see. But we're aware of that, and we're going to discuss that further with them.
Yeah. I would just say, I mean, for me, I mean, I know you get what you pay for, but for me at this point, something is better than nothing than what we have right now that can alert our residents of potential dangers that's described up there. So I would ask that we at least reach out to them to see, you know, what exactly it does or doesn't do. Because like I said, something is better than nothing for me when it comes to a safety standpoint.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And we would probably discuss those options also with Bill Farr. You know, not go beyond the sheriff's department. And you know, I hear what you're saying, but we want to do a one-time expense, and you know, an alternative maybe half-cent sales tax also. Given, I mean, that's a finite number of dollars, so we have to be careful we don't just use those dollars for everything that's not funded, but that's also something that we're exploring as far as an alternate funding source. So, but we'll do that, absolutely.
I might add that I have experience with both systems, the system that the Cole County has, and also the Sheriff's Office, and the RAVE, which in your pink sheet is quite a bit of explanation of what the system is. And this RAVE system is quite a bit more enhanced than my experiences with the other product. And but it does seem to benefit. This is a system that benefits the more people that sign on to it. I mean, in my experience in Osage County, they're trying to get the schools involved and the college and the police and everybody. And when they're all talking on the same language, it really is kind of like a better system when everybody could get on the same page. But my experience with this is it's pretty outstanding piece of software, and it's one that can build up. You don't have to buy everything all at once. You can buy certain pieces of it, and there's a software app that goes on your iPhone that you hit panic button and you're calling 911, and you're being alerted as a GeoNet. They know where you're at even. So it's a good system, and I think we ought to continue to have it up for consideration.
It depends on your perspective. From the council, they're all city dollars. From my perspective, I can reduce police costs. For instance, Public Works would be another city department that would utilize this also. I mean, just there's so many things this system will do that we could bring in a lot of partners. You mentioned the school district. I mean, I really think 36,000 is misleading when you consider the partners that can be included in that system. So I'll conclude with that.
Any other questions? Next section then. Oh, excuse me, Councilman Hussey.
I don't want to cut him off, but are you finished on sections? Or did you have more to go through?
2 more. They're short.
I'll wait until I.
So what happened? We don't have anything. The other two are the SRO program, which is funded at a 50-50 level with the school district. 6 officers are funded through that sharing program, and the sergeant or supervisor and 1 other person at JCAC are funded fully by the police department. We are going to consider maybe approaching the school district about the 7th position next year, see how that goes. So I didn't prepare anything on the SRO program. It's pretty simple. It's basically funding 6 officers. That's in the high school, 2 in the high school, 1 in each middle school, 1 floater around the elementary schools, 1 at JCAC, what am I missing? And Simonson. That comprises that unit. Very beneficial. Not only do officers get to know the kids that are in those schools, but it certainly negates the need to send patrol officers to those schools for calls for service, because the officer's already there. And that's a tremendous workload transferred to those SROs that do not have to be addressed by field officers. So, very important. The Mustang program is diminished to the point there's, what is it, $6,000 in it right now. No positions are funded, I believe. I know that for 20 years, rumors of the demise of Mustang has circulated. I think we're about to see that happen. But we wanted to participate as a team player to the extent that we can. We simply believe we should assume the cost of personnel assigned to Mustang, because we're not hopeful that funding will continue. In fact, this year it's already diminished or gone?
The funding, yes.
Gone. Yeah. The state is not elected to fund positions for the Mustang Drug Task Force, so very little in that budget. Very little. And I'll entertain any other questions.
Any questions for the chief? Councilman Hussey.
My question goes back to vehicles. First question is, how many are in the fleet in terms of the general Ford Explorer vehicle?
I believe 27.
So 27. And then it looks like, based on an average turnover, I mean, you cited the highway patrol, but that 120,000 miles, and if my numbers are correct, I'm looking at some of the vehicles we're replacing, they're averaging 40 to 45,000, or no, less than that?
The ones we're replacing
per year.
Yeah,
35, 40.
Yeah, they probably average around, well, it varies, but you might have 30,000 a year, over 40,000 a year. It just depends.
And so I guess where I'm leading is, realistically, to maintain the fleet at a mileage that you prefer, we've got to replace 9 vehicles every year. Essentially,
that's the way it used to be.
They're for 3.
And that was, Councilman, at about, we kept it under 100,000 to do that. We considering that at that time we averaged 30-some thousand, we could replace a third every year and maintain a reliable fleet. It was 2013 where that kind of went down the tubes.
Yeah. And so I guess that's been 4 or 5 years later. I think I asked the same question a lot of times, but just, is 100,000 still the magic number? Have a 2018 Ford Explorer, is it rated to go 125, 130 versus 6-7 years ago that car would have gone 100? I understand that maintenance and whatever are stretching things thinner and thinner. It's hard to look at the budget and think that we can replace probably 9 a year without cutting some other vehicles or services or employees and those things. And so I want to make sure we get on a healthy rotation to take care of these vehicles, that 1, you feel comfortable, but 2, that the council feels comfortable with the rotation, so that when the ask comes, this is really what needs to get done this year. We've taken care of it, and I'm going to need this next year and the year after. And I know that.
Well, I guess I just draw a comparison to the highway patrol. I'm not suggesting that we can't survive on, with cars that go much higher mileage for some reason. They have for years, and I know Kansas Highway Patrol did the same thing. 50 to 60,000 miles, they were deadlined. What I'm saying is, when the funding was better, we did get on a system of 9 a year, and could replace the fleet every 3 years and keep the mileage under 100,000. Sean's not here to talk about maintenance cost. It's just the fact, from his anecdotal knowledge, that maintenance costs go up, safety goes down. I know the difficulty in funding cars. We're running 29,000 approximately, and I don't think that covers all the emergency equipment in it. I appreciate that. I'm just forewarning, I guess, that the mileage and the maintenance costs and the safety factors are going to continue to be there. And as Steve said, hopefully we can address it in some manner in the near future. But it is what it is, and we're driving cars with very high mileage on them. And there is no right answer. If you have to drive them, you have to drive them. And what we do, we will look at maintenance records, crash history, whatever we can access, and we move cars offline and give them to the SROs and places that where they don't have the emergency pursuit driving needs. And that's one reason we can get cars past 100,000 miles is I really don't like doing that for patrol cars, for those that respond to calls for service under emergency situations routinely. And we do have a lot of those every day. Usually it doesn't become critical. They're not critical incidents, but we don't know that till we get there. So there's a lot of emergency driving that occurs. That's the odd thing with patrol. Those are highway miles. We're city miles, and that's harder on the vehicle. So I'm not pretending I know the answer to that. Simply giving you kind of a perspective, the big picture kind of thing to do with what you can.
Do we track how those miles are accumulated? And I'm just stabbing in the dark here, but are there other police departments out there, other cities that have become creative about trying to limit miles on vehicles or routes that are taken? It's a balance. People like to see police officers on the street, but at the same time, I'm just kind of curious, do we sort of try to minimize vehicles just driving the neighborhood or the city to keep miles down?
We don't much, to a small degree. If the roads are icy, we say park it at a major intersection so you're seen, but don't drive and have a crash, things like that. We have prioritized safety, and the alternative is to park it or to stop it. And so then, it's reasonable to expect crime rates to go up, community comfort to go down. They like to see police officers. They like to see cars parked in their neighborhood. They like to see them drive down their streets, because we're told, I haven't seen a car in a week. They watch for those things. So it's just a matter of prioritizing what we think is most important. So yeah, we put the miles on, but we feel that it's so beneficial to the community on different levels in many different ways.
Okay.
Councilman Graham.
I yield to Councilwoman.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Last year we had a discussion and we approved motorcycles for the police department. Would an increase in motorcycles and maybe a decrease in car fleet increase productivity or decrease some of those other costs? Because I know we talked about gas costs would be decreased.
Motorcycles are very effective for about half the year. When it gets real hot, it's dangerous, and when it's real cold, it's dangerous, prohibitive. So you're cutting in by half, by 50%, the use of those types of vehicles. There's no question they can go places motor vehicles can't, or, you know, four-door vehicles can't go. But, you know, yes, it could, but again, there's always sacrifices. The coin, the infamous coin, always has two sides. And so you look at both sides and you say, what is best? I will point out, we didn't add motorcycles. We simply purchased them because the leasing arrangement was becoming cost prohibitive. So in fact, I think when I arrived here many years ago, we had 6, and now we have 5. So we've actually reduced it by 1. But there are benefits to a motorcycle. There's no question, but you'll pay a price for them also.
Thank you for that clarification on the leasing.
So Chief, you said that you had a request for 7, 5 is being funded. So I guess my next question is probably for Marge. Whenever they get ready to sell those fleet of vehicles that's old or has a lot of miles on those, the funding that they receive from selling those vehicles, can they be placed back into a line item that could go back to use for next year for purchasing of vehicles? For example, if we're going to purchase 5 now, next year if they're needing 7, we'll purchase 5, and then they can pull hopefully 2 more out of this line item budget instead of just taking it back to general revenue. Can there be a line item that's created for all the sales of the police vehicles that they go back and we're able to continue to purchase vehicles? Is that possible?
Of course it's possible. Historically, that is a line item in the revenues, sale of assets, and it's actually, I increased that revenue projection this year based on the average price of the vehicles that we've sold, you know, what we've been getting the last couple of years. But then you get into if you do that for police, are you going to do that for public works when they sell their large pieces of equipment and need replacement? So we've got an overall citywide replacement plan for vehicles and equipment, and yes, the sale when we surplus vehicles helps by actually being a revenue line item in the general fund. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. I don't know.
I mean, if you want to restrict the profits from the surplus sale to the departments that sold the equipment, that's your prerogative. But then we have a citywide capital replacement plan.
And you would need, you would need to reduce the revenue piece, so it's kind of a wash there.
It is.
You'd have to bring down the revenue number because we already have that in the overall revenues, and if you're going to dedicate that, then it would just be really one pocket to the other.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just don't know what the request is for Mr. Sanders' area request for vehicles compared to, I know that each and every year there's a request for police vehicles to the tune of at least 5 to 7, and I think Councilman Hussey said 9. So if we know that we're looking at that each and every year, I don't think we're looking at that large of a number with the public works vehicles each and every year.
As I said when we started this discussion the first day, I think vehicles are underfunded. I think buildings underfunded. I think salaries are definitely underfunded. So I agree with you. But I think there's a need for all of those. So all those unfunded ones, certainly there's a need. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, my quick notes said this came to a head really in a discussion of 2016 when we were going to lease vehicles, and we made a decision in 2016 budget deliberations not to go down the lease purchase path for vehicles, and that's, if you remember, that's when we made an unpopular choice back then and decided to increase the GRUT tax and also commit that to a sinking fund that was a part of the capital replacement program. I think I've heard enough discussion here tonight that maybe, Steve, if you could catch us up on how that capital replacement program works and how it's going to solve some of these problems, because police had asked for 9 cars in 2016, 9 in 17, and looks like 7 in 18. So I know we're continually addressing that through that CRP, but I'd like to have a lot more confident that that sinking fund's doing what we asked it to do years ago.
Let's see. The only sinking fund that we have is for the building. And that's on your, do you have your big sheet?
Yeah, that's the blue line.
So, in that section 3, really it's the first line there. For facility needs, buildings. Is that what you're talking about? So that was, so I think last year was the first year we did the $300,000 in a sinking fund, if you want to call it that, where we try to build up over a period of time. Britt led the review with all the department directors about trying to identify the upcoming short-term and granted long-term building needs, air conditioning, roof, different things like that, even some smaller kinds of things. So so we kind of made an estimate of what that would be on those needs and divided that over a lifetime general lifetime of those building needs, and that was about $300,000 a year. Doesn't mean we would spend that necessarily, because there may be an upcoming year where some of the HVAC, the air conditioning kinds of things can get pretty expensive very quickly. So that was what for that number. For the equipment, there was a similar exercise in trying to identify the projected need over a period of time, but we didn't set up a sinking fund for that necessarily. That's really funded different places, different things, general fund, some sales tax, some. There's definitely a need for it, absolutely. A big hunk of funding for equipment came with fire vehicles this year. I don't know if Margie has anything you want to add to that, or anybody else. Britt, that was kind of the architect on a lot of that.
I don't think I have anything I can add.
There's a lot of work. I mean, it wasn't, there was a basis for both of those, for both the building and the vehicle. They spent a lot of time, staff did, on going through and trying to identify what the needs would be. So yeah, if you could figure out a way to do it, that'd be great.
Okay. Yes, Councilman Fitzwater.
Just had a question. I was tagging on Councilman Hussey's question earlier. He talked a little bit about the highway patrol. They've obviously taken a different vehicle that they use versus what we use. Is there a significant difference in unit cost between the types of vehicles, or are they volume making their difference?
Well, I mean, it's just a guess. I mean, they have a lot of Dodge products, and I don't know the difference in expense without asking. I mean, the central location for statewide for vehicles is at Troop F, and if you go back there and look at the number of new cars that they have, they make a very large purchase every year, so I can only assume that they get some type of cost break because of it. Now, what the Dodges cost compared to Ford, for instance, I don't know. I'm sorry.
There's some merit to having consistency in fleet, by manufacturer, whether it's one size of vehicle or another, but consistency, there's some merit to that.
Any further questions from police? Okay, and we can always come back and address some of those issues later as upon your will. Thank you, Chief. I believe our meetings are announced to begin at 5:30 and end at 7. So, in fairness to the fire department,
They can do it in 5 minutes.
I think
6.
It's the desire of the council, seated council here, but I feel like we need to give the chief his due time. So I think I would ask for an adjournment. Otherwise, any further discussion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I have a second on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Adjourned.